begin to talk a little bit more about Vision Zero and appreciate your support in helping us make our community safer for everybody as we move forward. We began this journey to Vision Zero about 10 months ago, and it is our goal and hopefully our community will share our vision of a future where someday we will have no deaths or no serious injuries as a result of traffic accidents. So you're going to learn all about that process and how we are eventually going to get to that over the evening, but throughout the next 10 years as well. Before I get into the agenda, I just wanted to introduce our mayor, and it's Mayor Sherry Cantor, and it was our mayor's vision to pursue Vision Zero. So we appreciate that, and she would just like to say a few words to folks here and folks watching at home. So, Mayor Cantor.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Thank you. I want to really say I appreciate your being here. I appreciate your being part of the process to learn about what Vision Zero is, what the task force is doing, and ultimately what the town will do to make our roads safer for all users. It is really important. It is a quality of life issue. It is an everyday public safety issue, and we have incredible partners. Our police chief is back there, and I saw our assistant chief. Yeah, our assistant chief, our community planning, our engineering department are all working really hard, and there's nothing worse as a town leader, town manager, and I hearing about a bad accident, something that happened, somebody that was injured on a road. And I know we can do better. We can all change our behaviors in ways, but we need to make some foundational changes to keep our community safer, because we have experienced serious accidents. People do go too fast. They don't give the right of way necessarily where they should. Cyclists also need to follow the rules of the road, as do pedestrians. But we really, those vulnerable users, we really have to be very careful with them. So you're going to hear the presentation. We're going to be asked for some feedback. You have the online the information online, that survey, that please spread the word. You're here. There's empty seats. I wish there weren't. But hopefully you can spread the word to your neighbors and friends to say, you know what, please help me fill this out. If you have an area, and honestly, town manager and I hear all the time, cars are going too fast. I don't feel safe crossing this street. This is your time to communicate and share that with our consultants and the town staff. So please take the time to do it. Again, have a wonderful, enriching evening, and thank you so much for your commitment to make your community safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So we're going to spend a couple of more minutes with introductions, and from there we will turn it over to our consultants at FHI and Tool Design, and we will spend quite a bit of time going over. They will provide an in-depth overview of what Vision Zero is and what it will mean to our community in the years ahead. We will learn about what the work our Vision Zero Task Force has been doing since they've been working together since January, so you'll hear about that tonight. We will talk about data. You'll hear about the data that our Vision Task Force has been using to incorporate into our potential action plan, and then part of that data is the interactive map that folks are taking advantage of around town. So that's another data point that certainly we will want to talk about tonight. And then we'll talk about next steps, which will include another public meeting that will be held in December, and we'll follow up with a date on that. And following that presentation from FHI and Tool Design, we will have an open house session right here in the auditorium. So folks will be able to interact with members of the consulting team, as well as members of the Vision Zero Task Force, to ask questions, to probe, to learn more about what we're trying to accomplish, and share your thoughts and concerns. That's very important to what we're doing as part of the project. I'd quickly like to introduce you to our team. So we have our consultants from FHI. So we have Parker and Adam. I think will be doing most of the presentation this evening from a PowerPoint perspective. You'll see them up here at the podium. And then we have Michael, Shauna, and Ben, who are all here as well. So they will be part of the open house. So at the end of the presentation, we'll have the opportunity to interact with them. Also want to take a moment to recognize our Vision Zero Task Force. So if you're part of the Vision Zero Task Force, if you don't mind just standing up for a moment. Sorry to put you under the spot, team, but we've been working together as a team, and actually there's a lot more. We have a couple more in the back as well who have been very much a part of the process since January. We've been meeting every single month. And then as we moved into the summer and we broke out into subcommittee work, we were meeting almost on a weekly basis. So appreciate you all being here tonight and your commitment to helping us develop this action plan. So what led us to Vision Zero? So back in January, our town council implemented a resolution for the town manager and staff to implement a Vision Zero initiative. And as folks may remember, that followed a very tragic year. 2022 was probably one of our more tragic years in the history of our town in terms of deadly accidents. So we had 6 people lose their lives on our roads. So in the summer of 22, we had a pedestrian who was struck and killed right out here in the center. And then as we moved to the holidays, we had 2 pedestrians who were struck almost within 24 hours of each other, struck and killed by a car the week leading up to Christmas. And then Christmas morning, we had a head-on collision on Simsbury Road that resulted in the deaths of 3 individuals. So again, one of the worst years in our history. And it's been a trend, as you can see in the U.S., a trend that is that we've seen across the state and certainly across the country as well. But everything that we've learned about Vision Zero, we do think this is the solution to get us to 0 deaths and 0 serious injuries within 10 years. It's also something the state's working on as well. There's a Vision Zero bill that was passed at the last session. So we're hopeful that this is something. Right now, West Hartford and Stamford are the 2 communities that are pursuing the Vision Zero model, but through the state's work as well and their Vision Zero Council, we're hopeful that this is something that we will see throughout the entire state, and that will make a big difference for not just West Hartford, but the state of Connecticut, which is our hope. So that's what I'd like to do right now is just turn things over to our Director of Community Development, Dwayne Martin. And Dwayne's just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about how Vision Zero will complement some of the policies and programs that we have in place already, like our Complete Streets policy. So, Dwayne?
Thank you, Rick. Good evening, everyone. So as you can see on the screen behind me, and based on what Rick said, it's true. The town of West Hartford has programs and policies in place, and we've been using those for quite some time. We have our Plan of Conservation and Development, which is fairly new, recently renewed. There's a lot of elements in there related to our transportation system and some aspirational goals to improve it. We also have a Complete Streets policy. Building off of that, we have our bicycle facility plan and sidewalk policy. We've also been working on our traffic signals and sidewalk ramps to continue to get them into ADA compliance for safety reasons. And then lastly, we have a neighborhood street traffic calming program, which has been around for a couple of years, and we have traffic calming elements all over town, including medians and bump outs and other ways of slowing traffic and improving safety for all users, in particular vulnerable users. We also have recently implemented a road diet, which was successful on North Main Street. A lot of people are familiar with that. There's a photo of it on the screen behind me, which was a instrumental project in improving the safety along that corridor and slowing speeds down. Despite our best efforts in all of these policies and programs, we still ran into trouble with our crashes, like many communities across the country, and in particular in Connecticut. So we do want to improve, and we will continue these programs, but they are separate from, but will complement our Vision Zero program. Whoop. Sorry. There we go. Sorry about that. So this slide has a couple photos there, again, of the road diet on North Main Street as well as the sidewalk, but it really is to highlight how we're complementing our ongoing programs with our Vision Zero action plan. And it states Vision Zero is one of many ongoing and upcoming efforts to promote roadway safety in West Hartford. So the point in all this is we've been making a lot of efforts to improve safety for all users, but more needs to be done. We're not abandoning those efforts, those policies and programs. This is intended to supplement that or work in concert with that. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for coming out. As you've heard over and over again, this is an incredibly important issue. And the topic that we're focusing on right now has real impacts on people's lives. And your contribution to that effort is important. What I'm going to walk through you today is a little bit about just the context of what Vision Zero is. This is actually an international and national movement to approach the design and use of streets and sidewalks and bike lanes in a very different way. It's something called a safe streets approach. And the idea is that if you focus on these 5 major themes: safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, and post-crash care, which is really what happens after an incident occurs, then you can actually eliminate deaths and serious injuries. And I think it's really critical to remind ourselves all the time that that's the focus of our work. And what you might be wondering is, like, why aren't we doing this? Or how are we doing it now? How do we have to rethink our strategy? And the sort of conventional approach that's been used in, really all roadway design for the past, 50, 60 years is that traffic deaths are inevitable. It's kind of a crazy idea to think that, but for a long time we've accepted that that's okay. That we need to just prevent collisions, all types of collisions, that they're all equal. That we need to just assume that everybody is going to be perfect drivers, whether they're new drivers or old drivers, whether they've had a long day at work. Everybody is expected to be perfect all the time. And that we put a lot of responsibility on individuals. We put a lot of responsibility on drivers to be perfect all the time. And if they aren't perfect, then we blame them. A Vision Zero approach is very different. It starts with the fundamental belief that traffic deaths are preventable. One of the great things about where West Hartford is there's communities all across the country that have shown that if you take this approach, that can be true. So you don't have to believe, you can know. That instead of focusing on all crash types, the Vision Zero approach really focuses on fatal and serious crashes, right? Because these are the life-changing crashes that impact, our communities. It's when we lose friends, it's when we lose parents, children. It's not when we lose a bumper. Those are different experiences. And it recognizes that we're all human, right? I try to tell my partner that all the time. She doesn't always want to believe me. But we make mistakes, right? And when we're roadway users, we have to acknowledge, and when we're designing roadways, we have to acknowledge that people aren't always going to act perfectly, and we need to design accordingly. And finally, it recognizes that this is not something that is just an individual driver or bicyclist or pedestrian's responsibility. We are, as a community, responsible for addressing this issue. And so it takes a systems approach to design. Great thing about Vision Zero is there's been a lot of work done on this. If you're interested in this, the Vision Zero Network is a great resource to learn more. They've published this report that identifies some of the key successful elements of Vision Zero planning. One of the big ones is it's data-driven. We're going to talk a little bit about this today, but it's really about looking at crash history, looking at where things are occurring, trying to understand what the problems are, and trying to solve those problems. So it's really, really driven by this idea that we need to work with the information that we have right now. That you need to set clear timetables for implementation. As been illustrated before here, people have died. And we need to have a clear understanding of when we can expect change to happen. Goals need to be measurable. We need to understand how many number of intersections we're going to be addressing, how many miles of whatever it is we're going to be installing to be able to track our progress along this. There's been a real recognition and an emphasis on equity, that for a long time we have made transportation investments that have not acknowledged the fact that there are communities that suffer disproportionately because of their location and their history and their abilities to traffic deaths and serious injuries. It needs to be accountable, and it needs to be transparent. You all need to be involved in this process. You all need to be able to see how this process is working. So this plan is going to be sort of the starting point for the work that you're going to be doing. I like to think of it as it's the roadmap. It tells you how you're going to get there, but it's really just the start to all of this. And it's really going to focus on prioritizing investments at high injury locations. So going back to this approach, the old approach was we're going to spread the investments out to different political districts, or we're going to spread them out to different areas because we want to be geographically diverse. This is about focusing on where the problems are. And a big part of all of this is that it really sets you up for securing federal funding, because we recognize that this is a big issue and it's going to require resources beyond what West Hartford has in place to move them forward. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the study process. We're at the top, so January 23, they sort of started this process. We're in the community engagement phase and the safety analysis phase. You're going to hear a little bit more about that today. At the end of this year, you're going to have an action plan. It's going to be ready to go. It's going to be ready to implement. One of the things that we've talked with the task force about, we've talked with the town about this, is that action plan doesn't just get chiseled in stone and it never gets updated. You're constantly going to be looking at progress that you're making, lessons that you're learning along the way, and then you're going to be updating that plan because it's going to take a little bit of time. And you're going to need to recognize that you're going to have high priority issues, and then you're going to have sort of secondary high priority issues and tertiary high priority issues that you're going to have to go after. There's going to be a lot of public and stakeholder input. So one of the great things, we already got the task force that stood up. I won't make you all stand up again, but they have been great. They played a really key role in driving this process and making sure that it's focused on West Hartford. There's a community web map that you all hopefully have already participated in or used. If you haven't, we're going to give you an opportunity to do that today. There's a public survey. There'll be more public meetings around this. You can drop emails to us if you have particular issues or ideas that you want to share. And then we've done stakeholder meetings. All of that work, there we go. All of that work is going to really help us to define what the problems are, prioritize locations within the high injury network, and then identify the types of changes that are going to happen. So I think one of the things that is important to understand in this process is we're going to be able to sort of identify where things need to happen, but at this stage in the process, sort of at the end of this, we're not going to have all the answers about what kind of interventions need to happen to make places safer. We're not going to have all the design solutions packed up and ready to go. And so we're going to need your input on what those things should be, so when that process starts, that's not starting from zero. So this is a little bit of it, getting into the details of how we're going to use your input. So we want to understand what your lived experience is. We have crash reports, we have data, it's all very factual and analytical. That is not a substitute for your experience walking, biking, driving, taking the bus here. You can give us a lot of information about what kind of improvements are needed, where the safety concerns are. It's going to help us focus our attention. So we're going to have a high injury network. We'll talk a little bit about that. But there's going to be a need to prioritize projects within that high injury network. And your input is going to be very important in that process. It's going to help lay the foundation for implementation. When you start making interventions, you're going to go through a standard design process. That's not going to typically change. And your input is going to help us understand better and help the town understand better what kind of interventions are going to be best in different locations. And then finally, one of the things that's really critical here is your participation really sets the town up for funding. All the funding sources now want to demonstrate that you have had strong community engagement. They want you to be able to document how that engagement has changed your planning process. And so by even participating here today, you are helping the implementation of this plan because you're showing to those federal funders that West Hartford residents care. They participated, they want to see this happen, and if the federal government gives West Hartford money, it will go to a good use. So the web mapping survey is up. You'll see it in the back. We've got links to it. That's the best place right now to sort of get your ideas in there. And then we're going to walk through now a little bit more in detail the sort of technical side of the project.
Thanks, Adam. So as Adam mentioned, and the prior speakers, we want this to be really a data-driven process from the get-go. So just really want to highlight some of the high-level observations that we have as a project team at this point, and we certainly are more than willing to extend the conversation during the workshop. So really just want to highlight that this is really a three-pronged approach to identifying some of those initial areas that we want to be focusing our energy on. We certainly have a strong technical analysis with the crash data and the crash history. We've identified thus far a high injury network, which I'll walk you through a little bit in the next few slides. And we've also taken a look at some of the local roads, some of those neighborhood streets in town. So that's the second map in red, and we can certainly talk more after. But we also want to take a look at equity, make sure that we're prioritizing areas in those areas and all through town, and then as well as looking at projects that have community support. This is actually a heat map showing the areas that we've received pins on the web map survey, about 1,300 responses thus far. So we really appreciate your input in that venue. So I just want to highlight really three high-level takeaways that we've had thus far. So two graphs presented behind me. First, taking a look at all crashes in the last 5 years, 2018 to 2022, relative West Hartford relative to what's happening statewide in Connecticut. So you see the orange line below is West Hartford, just showing the trend compared to the state. We're actually trending down in terms of all crashes, so that's positive. But conversely, and we really want to make this point, is the graph on the right side of the screen. So as Adam mentioned, those most serious injury and those crashes resulting in fatality, what is happening in town in West Hartford, especially related to the state. So you'll see that orange line is where we are as a community, and it is really headed in the wrong direction. 2.5 times the number of crashes resulting in fatality or serious injury in 2022 as 2018. So finding one, really quite simply, fatal and serious injury crashes have increased over the past 5 years. The second thing we want to talk about are vulnerable users. We heard some reference to that. So who are vulnerable users on our roadways? Really our pedestrians and our bicyclists. So how are they experiencing crashes relative to motorist crashes? So this graph behind me shows crash severity by mode, and really, quite simply, take away 90% of crashes involving bicyclists or pedestrians are resulting in some form of injury. And that really compares to 30% of crashes that are only including motorists that result in injury. And then really take a look at that top line, the 14% in the top bar there. That's 14% of pedestrian crashes are resulting in serious injury or fatality. So a very high percentage of number. So second takeaway, quite simply, pedestrian and bicyclist crashes are more likely to result in injury or fatality. Then the next thing we just want to highlight is just that we've already identified a high injury network. We'll present more details in the back during the workshop, but just want to share how that was developed. We took a look at the 5-year crash history for all modes, your pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and also looked at motorist crash rate. So where is traffic low, but crashes might be occurring with a higher degree relative to the traffic level. And then we also did a predictive analysis relative to pedestrians and bicyclist crashes. So we took a look at demographic data, we took a look at facility types, and did a prediction for crash predictive analysis on where we might expect a serious injury or fatality to occur relative to our vulnerable users, even if we haven't seen one in the last 5 years. So on all, our high injury network as it stands today is about 9% of the roadway miles in town, and it's over half, or about 56% of the fatal or serious injury crashes. So quite simply, you can see just by focusing and prioritizing some of our effort on this smaller subset of roads, we can really address many of the fatal and serious injury crashes that we have seen over the last 5 years. Thank you.
So you might be wondering, why is the town of West Hartford really making this investment in a Vision Zero plan? And one of the reasons for that is that it's a process that really works. We've seen a lot of locations around the country who have seen significant reductions in serious crashes and fatal roadway injury or fatalities. As Adam mentioned before, there's this process that takes place. So once the plan is completed, it doesn't just sit on a shelf and collect dust. It is a process that continually is updated, projects are implemented, they're monitored, and then they're improved upon. I want to highlight a case study to just help visualize the potential there could be to really lead to significant changes regarding crash statistics in West Hartford. Jersey City may be a very different community from West Hartford, but the process is one that we've identified, as well as the task force has identified, as a really great process and a really effective process, as it turns out. It's one that involves planning, implementation, monitoring, and an acceptance that the roadway safety is a shared responsibility. So let's start back a few years ago when they came out with an action plan. To help you understand what really goes into an action plan, here are some elements. So Parker mentioned a crash analysis, so really taking that data-driven approach, analyzing that data and developing a high injury network to understand which roadways where safety improvement investments could really change the dynamic in the city as far as greater reduction in fatalities and serious injuries. There's also a lot of community input. So understanding how the community feels for all of the reasons that Adam cited really helps us understand where the investment should occur and how those investments can adequately address community concerns. And then last, not the flashiest of things, but the implementation matrix. So thinking about actions, timelines, partners, and performance metrics. So going forward, when projects are actually implemented, that there's an understanding of what makes for a successful project. So all of these combined really formed the action plan. So how did it turn out? So last year in 2022, Jersey City made it through the entire year with 0 fatalities on their roads. This was several years ahead of schedule. So when you think about a planning process like this, and you think about something that's maybe a longer term timeline, Vision Zero is different because it can actually accelerate the timeline. It can accelerate implementation, help you win the grants that can really make some of these transformative changes possible. I'll conclude by saying there's Vision Zero plans, so this is a roadmap, a framework for understanding where the investments could go. But then there's facility plans, thinking about pedestrian plans, so sidewalk improvement plans, for instance, bike plans, parking plans. These are all facility plans. So these kind of together form, a real strategy for actually improving roadway safety throughout West Hartford. And then we'll conclude with Adam discussing next steps.
Thanks. So now we get to do the fun part, which is you don't have to listen to us anymore and we get to listen to you a little bit more. First and foremost, I want to make sure that if you want to stay abreast of everything that's happening in the project, make sure that you've added your contact information to the sign-in sheet. We'll keep you updated about this project via that. So we've got some open house stations that are sort of around in the back here, including the web map survey that hopefully all of you have participated in, but if you have not, we'll give you a nice tutorial of that. We'll talk a little bit about the study schedule, so if you're at all interested in the process and how it's going to move forward, we can talk to you about that. And then we've got a board over here that gets into a little bit of the details of the safety assessment. And you can talk to Parker about the process for how that was developed and how that will be used. The other thing that we want to really emphasize is for you to mark your calendars for Tuesday, October 3rd, to make sure that you participate in the workshop. This is especially for the people at home, that by Tuesday, October 3rd, you've participated in that web map survey. And then you attend the December 6th public meeting. Again, if we've got your information, we will make sure that you are notified when the details of that come about, but you'll also find that information on the town website. So with that, I would like to thank all of you who are here and all of you who are at home watching this for coming and participating, and encourage you to get up, walk around a little bit, introduce yourselves to the project team, and ask us your questions that you have. So thank you very much.